Fork Environmental Council. For anybody who doesn't already know, we've been around for 52 years, which is kind of a great thing when you think about it. And I wanted to introduce you to Jan Albaladejo here. He is a student at NYU, a Greenport High School graduate, and he's been an intern with me this summer, and it's been a really interesting experience. He can tell you all about it after this program. Jan, take it from here.
First of all, I want to say thank you to our two panelists who we'll be hearing from shortly after our presentation, Mark and Mike. And I want to thank...
Louder.
Yes.
Hold up one second. Let me get this bad boy ready. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you guys all for coming out here and showing some interest and attention in our environment. I just wanted to make it very clear that North Fork Environmental at FEC does not yet have a position on BESS. We just wanted to come out here and inform the community and let you guys get involved. So let's take it away. BESS, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So here's the basics of BESS. I know it's just a random acronym, no one really knows what it means. It stands for Battery Energy Storage System, which is exactly what you think it is. It's a set of batteries put together to save energy. Think of like a power bank or the battery in your phone, just on a much bigger scale. So usually it's used to store renewable energy, as in solar or such, in either a private residential BESS or in a commercial setting, but it can also be used for wind turbines and other forms of energy. This technology has started to proliferate. It's become a lot more popular recently. Europe and America are starting to set a lot of renewable energy goals and clean energy goals, and as such, interest in BESS is skyrocketing. The European market is expanding, the American market is expanding, so I think that now is the time to have this discussion and discuss the environmental aspects of BESS and how it should be handled in our community and inform all the residents of this town. So this is what a BESS looks like. Over here on the left-hand side, we have a commercial BESS. This is just one of many that you'll see put down somewhere. These are the ones that would hold enough energy for a building or maybe even for a town, or if you're a farmer and you have an electric tractor, you use one of these bad boys. This right here is a residential BESS. It's a lot smaller. You can keep it in your house, usually attached to a solar panel, and you would primarily use it in case of a blackout or to take some stress off the grid. So now that we know what a BESS is, we can get more into it. This right here is a commercial BESS in Arkansas. As you can see, this is a very big BESS. This is about 180 megawatt BESS. Much bigger, almost 3 times as big as the one that we've had proposed out here in Greenport. This right here is the BESS that we recently had proposed in Greenport. Not too recently though, before our town enacted its moratorium on BESS units so we could figure out how to take the best approach to it. It's right across the street from Drosso's. Everyone's here is familiar with Drosso's Motel and Mini Golf, and it would have been put in the Moores, what is now Moores Preserve. It is a patchwork green area, a green belt in Greenport, a very sensitive environmental area. It would have been an 80 megawatt BESS. So a little bit more of the basics and fundamentals. BESS comes in 2 different types of batteries. Lithium-ion batteries. These are the batteries that you keep in your phone, like a battery in that iPad right now, which is recording, or the battery in your laptop. And flow batteries. Flow batteries are a lot bigger, they're a lot safer, but they hold less energy and they're not as cheap. They're more inefficient, but they're better for the environment, and they're safer, they're less prone to something we like to call thermal runoff. So here I have some BESS benefits. First, we have energy integration, and then we have peak shaving, and then backup power. So solar, wind, and fossil fuels can all come together and fuel a BESS. So it's not as tied to one source of energy as our power grid is right now that relies very heavily on fossil fuels. Instead, you could hook up almost anything to a BESS and convert it to electric energy. And peak shaving. So peak shaving is whenever the grid is under a lot of stress, is when you experience blackouts or you start to have problems getting energy out. You would use your BESS system, and you would use that energy during peak hours, which is usually when people are getting home from work or waking up in the morning, or 7 a.m. on a Saturday, times when you're using electricity. And then if you have a BESS system, you could just use your own energy, which you've had stored at your house, and take some stress off the grid. Now, let's get to some of the drawbacks of BESS. Of course, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I like to use this little acronym called CELL. Cost, environmental impact, and the limited lifespan. As anyone who has a phone knows, like this one right here, the batteries, which are lithium ion, don't tend to last too long. You own your phone for 2 or 3 years, and then it can't hold a charge anymore and you're ready to switch it out. So when it comes to lithium ion BESSes, they don't age as fast as a phone battery would, but there's definitely a limited lifespan there. Okay. So let's get around to cost. BESS is a lot more expensive than traditional forms of energy. You could probably get a diesel generator for your farm or your house for a power outage for much cheaper than you possibly could a BESS system, and that comes with the fuel and the generator. BESS is only the battery. It doesn't include how you're getting the energy there. So the one that was proposed in Greenport would have been right in between these two, a 3-hour duration, 800 kilowatt BESS. And as you can see from the prices over here,
Sorry, we can't hear you that well.
Yes, sir.
Keep arguing away from the phone.
Why don't you hold the microphone in your hand?
So the one that was proposed in Greenport would have been a 3-hour BESS and 800 kilowatt. There's a lot of associated costs with BESS. And there's also some environmental concerns. Obviously, batteries aren't always the healthiest for the environment, whether that's their production, where you see lots of heavy metals and possible pollution into the environment, or maybe they're not using the best employment practices and the workers and the miners are getting hurt while they're putting these batteries together. Then we have the end of life. Just as in a phone, you need to do something with that battery at the end, and we don't really have the best recycling systems laid out for that. We see it with car batteries too all the time. So after your BESS has run its life course and you have about 80 kilowatts of batteries just laying there, you gotta decide what to do with that. Leakage, batteries do leak. Anybody's ever seen an old car battery, you'll know it'll leak. Lithium ion batteries leak a little different, but it's just as harmful for the environment and for those around them. And then thermal runaway. So thermal runaway is the big scare. This is what causes batteries to light on fire. As you see here, any of several different factors could lead to thermal runaway. Thermal runaway is when the battery is damaged to the point where it can't regulate its own heat and it just continues to get hotter and hotter and hotter until it catches on fire. Like if an electric car crashes into something and the battery catches on fire, that's an example of thermal runaway. There's also some scares of toxic chemicals involved in batteries. Of course, heavy metals, mercury, lead are used in different battery components. Things like cobalt, and we exactly don't want those where we live and where we breathe and where we farm and where we swim and where we fish. And PFAS chemicals, also known as forever chemicals, are also used in batteries, and those might possibly leak. And as that name tells us, forever chemicals, they're not too easy to clean up, and they're very hard to get rid of, and they pose a danger to our environment. As we were talking about before with thermal runoff, causes fires. BESSes are a very big blot on the radar of any single fire department, just because even though they might not always catch on fire, when they do, it's very hard to extinguish them. As in electric cars, BESS burns hot. Lithium ion batteries burn very hard, and most local fire departments just aren't ready to handle that and be able to put out this type of fire. Recently there was a fire in East Hampton which took a very long time to put out, and it was a lot of work for the local fire department at a residential BESS system. Now imagine if this had occurred at a commercial BESS system where it would have been possibly 10 times, 20 times more the batteries, 20 times more the heat, 20 times more the damage. And this fire triggered a scare out here along with the proposal of a BESS in Greenport, and Southold Town decided that it wanted to enact a moratorium on BESS, a moratorium that goes on until April 2025. So April next year. So we can take some time to think about this and best manage our approach to BESS. And here we have some of the other municipalities in the east. Riverhead has no moratorium. East Hampton has no moratorium. Southampton has followed our lead and enacted their own moratorium. And speaking of our moratorium, when it was proposed, Southold Town put together an 8-member task force to discuss BESS and to see what we could do possibly to make it palatable out here, both for the environment and both for the residents who are obviously very scared. There was also one proposed in Cutchogue, and the people down there at Oregon Road fought tooth and nail with some environmental concerns and some personal concerns to see it not happen. So that, and combined with the moratorium, neither that nor the Greenport one will be occurring. And the Southfield Town Task Force came up with these recommendations. The state has recently also outlined some recommendations in a draft which are very similar to Southfield Towns. So it shows that we're looking in the right places and we're starting to make some of the right decisions, as you can see. So the biggest focus here is on safety. They want BESSes that are built safely, that are accountable to us, to the public and the private, that work hand in hand with the fire departments out here, which are sometimes limited on time or personnel or money to make sure that these are as safe as possible. And like for example, a town would like to see that drills are done by the fire departments if any BESS is constructed out here, and that it is accessible and open to them at any time. And also that independent experts take a look at any possible BESS before it's built, so that the community could really take a look at this plan and see if it's in their best interest and not just the best interest of whoever is building this. All right, and that's the end of my little information session on BESS. I didn't want to bore you. So now that we have the basics, I want to get to a conversation with our two panelists. So give me 1 second. If you gentlemen wouldn't mind taking the stage. Sure.
Maybe.
Light.
All right, so I want to start off with Mark. And my first question is nice and simple. Mark, do you think that BESS is viable out here on the North Fork?
I'm not a scientist, and I'm not an expert on BESS, but, what's that? My name is Mark Hobner. I'm the president of the North Fork Environmental Council. We get pulled into these conversations all the time, but we want you to know that we're expanding our conversations, not just for the environment. It's in our title, but it's so much more. It's the social, the economic, and the environmental issues and legal and technology that have to be incorporated in these conversations. So the working group that they got together in Southold is really ideal. Information, education, awareness, and then we can make a decision. And I've forgotten the question.
No problem.
We're not in favor of it or against it right now. Proper siting is the most important thing. There was one proposed in Riverhead a couple of years ago that was directly between a mobile home park and all of the post office vehicles, gasoline vehicles. So we didn't think that was appropriate. So yeah. So no determination, and that's why we're here, community engagement, to get your thoughts on this, and then we bring those together, make an intelligent decision as a group.
All right, Mike, if you could just introduce yourself to the people here.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Mike Bose. I'm a senior project engineer at a company called Energy Safety Response Group, ESRG. So we are a group of about 50, probably 60% now of retired or active firefighters. And then the other 50% or 40% engineers. So I'm speaking from the engineering side, so apologies if I'm being too much of an egghead on anything. But our first goal is really to make sure that the fire departments are kept safe, because this has been a new technology. A lot of us work at the New York City Fire Department or other fire departments across the country. And so a lot of us sat on the other side of these conversations when a lot of companies were coming in and wanted to just install something, willy-nilly without, doing proper background research and then sharing that information with the actual departments. So really, that's what we're here for in a nutshell. We work with the interagency fire safety working group that the governor convened last year. So I've personally been going out to about almost every project in the state to see what the best practices we can update, same with like the code requirements. What are the gaps in knowledge, information here? And we try to organize that in a set of recommendations to update the New York State Fire Code. So that's kind of myself and our movement in a nutshell.
All right, Mike, now do you think that BESS is viable out here on the North Fork?
Yeah, I think so, and I know there's a lot of demand, especially in the summer, and really what you did a great job of, Jan, was explaining kind of how versatile energy storage is. You can use it for so many different purposes. Sometimes it will, help in one aspect, not useful in the other one, but it seems like here, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like there's a lot of opportunity here coming up. And so, getting together like you guys have convened us today is extremely important, so we can have a real conversation about it.
All right, moving on to our second question. What are the regulatory and policy challenges associated with deploying BESS in our ecologically sensitive environment, and how can they be addressed?
Looking at me. Yeah, the considerations, we've got zoning, we've got code, we've got a situation where we don't have code, we've got to build code. This is all, I worked on the comprehensive plan for Riverhead for the last 5 years, and it's grueling. So, getting something, I think we've got an awful lot of opportunity to make comparisons to other towns and cities, either of our size or greater. And I think we've got, looking at the panel that we put together for Southhold for the engineers that came together to talk about this, the citizens got together. And I think we've got a very strong an experience, a pool of experience, and I'm including the people in this room, certainly. I don't know what everybody's done for a living for their lives, but you are the people that need to be in these discussions. And that includes zoning, it includes code, it includes safety, the economics of it. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll agree with Mark on that. I think, and luckily we've got a lot of people that are working on maybe the boring stuff like the codes and the permitting, right? But it is so important because that gives everybody that's looking to bring this into, any jurisdiction. You've got a good set of guidelines, more comprehensive set of guidelines. So I think that's just very positive. And again, it's been a real work in progress, but the state developing new codes and, even the towns here, building off of those model codes to suit the needs of the specific town here, I think is really important. So not a fun answer, it's more boring stuff, but that's how the world goes around.
All right. Our next question is, how could BESS maximize energy capture while also maintaining the support of our local community and its residents?
Yep, and I think maybe one of you guys can jump in on it as well. I'm kind of focused on the safety aspect specifically. I have some experience with some of the actual cost savings and things like that. But for a more resilient grid, for backup power, microgrids, more distributed energy, to where we have to be less reliant on maybe a big utility company or something like that. And we've got a much more resilient grid. I think that's one of the most important things, and especially being, here out so far from, the rest of the state. I think that really plays into it here.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I want to take that even further. I want to stretch that out. Riverhead is in the favorable position of being the owner of their water company, their water district, and the flow and the piping and the pumping. It is, I believe, our sovereign right to water. I am extending, this is a little over the top maybe, but I'm extending this to energy as well. I believe we should own our own energy. I believe that we should be in control and derive the benefits from the energy that we produce. And not just for resilience, but also for independence. It has a lot to do with costing, it has to do with public-private partnerships, it has to do with community solar, and not to be feeding it into the grid and then paying 27 cents a kilowatt hour after putting all this out. I don't know how many acres we've got of solar panels in Riverhead. The community benefit on that is not sufficient as far as I'm concerned. It has to be upfront that we become partners in these developments. Yeah, let's leave it at that.
I just wanted,
Oh yeah, you got one?
Yeah, no, I'd love to hit you.
No, not at all. I actually just agree with you. I think, we do go out and speak to different towns, to different AHJs and fire departments to kind of provide our insight on, the safety of them. Because again, we are a test lab as well, so we set these things on fire, all that on a daily basis. And so our experience isn't coming from, an internet article or YouTube or something like that. But I think what a big problem is with a lot of companies that install them is they just come in, they don't explain to the town, what the benefits are. And I think that is so important. And so, even with the utility companies, with the project developers, it becomes so important that we can have a real conversation about this and let the whole town, who is, ultimately the one that has to deal with this, they know what they're getting out of it, so.
I want to take that to the back end too, and Jan had mentioned the idea that all of these things have a useful life. It's called end of useful life, EUL. And that's true of everything we buy. Your car, your phone, an aluminum kettle has a life, right? Very long life. But at the end of all of this, what are we doing with the parts? We have the same situation with solar panels. There's an industry starting to divert, recover, and reuse or recycle these units in the hundreds of thousands a month. The blades on a wind turbine are good for 3 years, and they are very expensive. They are 150 feet long, and up until now, until the recycling industry caught up, they've been burying them in landfills in Wyoming. They just dig up the dirt and they bury them because it takes too much energy to chop them up. The design was not pre-thought. I want to know that these things have a recovery rate. There's got to be a schedule to that. It's got to be put into the code. It's got to be put into the contract. And at the end of useful life, they are going somewhere. And the company that puts them in needs to be responsible for the recovery. I know in Europe, they're making refrigerators and you kind of lease them. You don't really own them. And at the end of useful life, Maytag or whoever shows up and picks them up and takes the skins off and melts down the whatever and rewinds the motors. They are responsible for it from cradle to cradle. Not cradle to grave, but cradle to cradle. And we need to be thinking in terms of this, especially for this, especially for solar units, especially for wind turbines, and especially for batteries.
I just wanted to chime into what Mark was saying earlier, that BESS systems are incredibly useful for democratizing energy and for giving municipalities and towns like Southhold more control over their energy systems instead of leaving it in the hands of someone like PSEG. And what I also wanted to say is to make BESS in the best possible way, to be the most efficient and the most palatable to community residents, is to put the community first, to kind of do what we're doing now and frame community involvement and try to get the community involved as much as possible in the construction or in the regulation or even just in the zoning, so that the community can weigh in and decide what's best for them and not just best for whoever's building these things. Now we're going to move on to our next question. What role could BESS play in achieving Southhold Town's long-term environmental resilience goals?
You're not doing that one, right?
No.
Okay, thank you. We are under an immense amount of pressure, and it has to do with our consumption. It has to do with the demand and supply of energy. It has to do with the law that is coming from Albany, from the state, for our Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, the CLCPA. We have goals that are set, and they're not arbitrary. It's not like being in a sales business where you have to increase your sales by 10% a month because I said so. We have certain goals. Biophysical laws are coming at us where we need to start reducing the amount of emissions, reducing the amount of consumption, and increasing the amount of renewable energy. And I air quoted the renewable part of the energy. All of these things, the wind turbines, the solar panels, the geothermal systems, they are not renewable. Their sources are renewable. Water that comes through a dam makes that a renewable energy. And right now it's about dams and hydroelectric are about 70% of the total makeup of renewable energy in this country. Solar made 3% of that total. We are working like crazy to get to 3%. The wind is another 1 or 2. It's very early and it's so expensive. And if you think about putting in, I'm pretty sure of these numbers. There's a winery nearby that's got a wind turbine. I don't see it flying a lot, and I remember the price being $600,000. How long, what is the payback on that money? So with all of that in mind, the things that we're building require carbon composite. They require concrete, they require aluminum, they require glass, and I'm probably forgetting something else. That all require, yes, please.
Well, don't the ion batteries require cobalt?
Yeah, so do the cars. Yeah, we'll get to the rare earths and the heavy metals. That's a whole nother discussion because that has to do with geopolitics. But the things that we need for our renewable energy capturing devices are all huge users of heat and energy all by themselves. And you can't use a wind turbine to make the glass for a solar panel. It doesn't work that way. So keep in mind that the more things that we need, the more fossil carbons that we have to actually burn in order to make them. And they've got a lifespan. Solar panels, 20, 25 years. The wind turbines, I heard 10 or 15. The batteries, I don't know. Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, I think it's about 20 years is I think what everybody says. They do degrade, like we're mentioning, so they'll have, augmentation programs, afterwards, and making sure that everybody adheres to that after, when the project gets sold off is important. I don't have too much to add to that. I am interested to talk about the heavy metals and all that, but I think you did a great job summing it up.
Thank you.
All right, this question is more for Mike. Sorry, it just popped into my head. I don't mean to catch you off guard with it, but what do you think the danger of pollution is and the danger of heavy metal leakages with these lithium-ion batteries in our town, in our very delicate environment like our wetlands?
Yeah, and so I'll start off by saying, that's not my background, in environmental, science, things like that. But as a test lab, we sample. And we were actually required to, at our test lab out in Ohio, to measure anything that's coming off it. So we say we burn a bunch of batteries, now we're extinguishing it or applying water, all that drainage, we had, measurements there. We didn't see anything that was that crazy. And we've heard a lot of concerns about a bunch of heavy metals, and that tracks with, I guess, common sense, right? But when we've been doing the testing, we've been looking at the results, and even with some of the incidents from last year, everybody wanted to see the data, right? So we got a bunch of samples taken after the events, sometimes during the events, and didn't find anything outside the bounds of what you would see in a typical structural fire. So as we go through, these discussions, I think it's important to recognize that nobody wants something that was burning in their lake or in their soil or their land. But I see this demonization with the energy storage systems, especially because we've got lithium, things like that, some heavy metals. But we see that, again, in all types of fires. So it's important to keep that in mind as well.
I'm sorry, I have to say something else. Okay. The lithium that we need, whether it's from Peru or Australia or China, we just found a new vein of lithium in, I think, Nevada. And they're all excited about it because it's on American soil. We've got American companies that can dig it up. There are some environmental issues to do with that, but My point about this is that they've got enough lithium there for 3 million cars. In the United States, we have 300 million cars. So 3 million of 300 million, what is that, 1%? All right, so we're gonna burn through that. We're gonna grab all that and make 3 million cars and we're done. That's the end of it, right? So I don't see this as a long-term solution. I don't see the individual car being the future of what we should be doing with our lithium. I'm gonna put it out again, that mass transit, if I take that 3 million and make 1 million buses or whatever, that we're gonna be better off in the long run. But we're not looking long run enough.
All right, our next question, this one's gonna be more for Mike, I wanted to ask. So, you have a lot of industry involvement, and what do you think the best practices are for the private sector to engage with local communities when it comes to things like this?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time thinking about this, because we see it go awry all the time when, companies come in, they just try to press something into the community, and all of a sudden they get the pushback or blowback, if you would rather. But it's important, number one, to be transparent and meet everybody out there and discuss what we're planning to put in. Right? That's number one. I think the second part is really engaging with the fire service early to make sure that they're aware of the potential hazards and the best practices around mitigating those if there is an incident. So, and to be honest, a lot of the fire departments that we go and speak to, they'll say, this is 99% of them say, okay, yeah, we just want to understand what the risk is. We don't want a salesperson coming in here blowing a bunch of smoke. We want to really talk about this, understand it. And once they do, they say, okay, we got it. Maybe they need some more help, down the road. We also think that fire department training early on, initial fire department training, site-specific training is critical. So when the fire department shows up to an incident, a lot of time they don't know what it is, what's on fire here. Some fires we've seen, they thought it was a refrigerator that was on fire. So, and that's not of any fault of their own either. It's that we need better education for them. I would also love to really see a lot of these companies be able to provide some sort of physical on-site emergency response so they can, if there are any gaps in knowledge for the fire department, they're not sure about something, that we've got somebody on site that can really speak intelligently about it and guide them through it so nobody gets hurt. That's, our main thing.
I'm seeing the dollar signs racking up here. If we are responsible for training the fire department, and we should. I know we've had offers from Suffolk County to come and help train they've got apparently all the documentation and the training and the testing and all that they need countywide, and they're willing to share that with our fire departments. But I'm seeing the amount of time, we've got a volunteer fire department. That's another thing. We don't have professional firefighters, and that's been a discussion. I talked to a Brookhaven fellow, and he's not against it. So maybe we should be talking about changing that model as well. I'm seeing that testing is great, but like you said, on site, are we gonna do drills? They're gonna get us to the particular Oregon Road site to really practice this out, to shut the road down. I mean, all the things that are involved with just that alone, and the money that's involved, should be part of the contract. Why are we footing the bill for this? Right?
And I have a question for you, Mark. How should South Town collaborate with neighboring communities and regional organizations to develop a coordinated approach to best development? It's many different communities out here, Southold, Riverhead, East Hampton, Southampton, but we all share one estuary and obviously one environment.
Yeah, the community engagement doesn't mean just the community of people who live here. It's the community of firefighters. It's the community of town supervisors and mayors. It's the community of scientists. It's the community of probably Stony Brook should be involved. The county should be involved. Department of Health Services should be involved. So that itself, in gathering a community of interested and parties who have a stake in this, stakeholders, has to be thought out. And again, I'm talking about big picture. We're not a coordinated effort, probably, again, we're duplicating what we're doing here. We duplicated from a meeting that we had 2 years ago over at the community center. It was great. We had the fire department, we had the energy, the disaster response people. We had all sorts of people at that meeting. So we need to do it again and again and again, and start folding all of these people together in a coordinated effort. I don't want to duplicate. Yes, zoning and code is going to be different town by town. I understand that. But if various towns get together and have a framework for how this should look, then we've not duplicated so much of this work.
All right, Mark, I have another question for you. I asked Mike a very similar one a little earlier, but what do you think the best practices for educating Southfield town residents and businesses about the potential positive and negative impacts of BESS are?
I think I saw a picture of the BESS task force already done. If it has to be done again, or if it needs a media presence, or if it needs to be gotten out more or differently, or different people involved, this is a different 60 people than I've seen before. So that's what I look forward to, seeing a different set of people showing up at these kinds of meetings, and do it over and over and over again.
All right, now I have one last question for both of my panelists, and then I hope to open it up to the crowd for a few
Can I
questions.
take you on that?
Oh, yes.
Because I wanted to say that this is such a great, I think this is the perfect kind of forum as well for, larger scale community engagement, because we've gone out to, individual town meetings, and this is an emotional topic. We don't have to lie about that. And to have a meeting where we can all talk, frankly, but also in a moderated sense, I think is good for everybody. Because once we start yelling at each other, nothing's gonna go well,
My dream with all these projects, and we just rolled out and announced the Citizens Cooperative Development Team for Riverhead. And what that is in 4 parts is that the citizens are involved, that the cooperation between citizenry and government and industry are all at the table. That development is not a bad thing. We're not bananas. They build absolutely nothing anywhere, never again. We are not those people anymore. We might have been 50 years ago with one project, but not anymore. It's got to be more inclusive. And the idea that it's a team, not a council, not a committee. Not that they're going to get together every Monday night for the next 200 years and not get anything done. The team is ad hoc. It gets a group of people like this, or the engineers and the safety together, fire department and town government, all in the same room. And when we're done with the project, we all go home. And it's not the same people over and over and over. It's very tiring. So maybe you go to one meeting once a year. If I had 24 people to go to town hall meetings, it would be 2 of you show up once a year. That's all the work that needs to be done. It doesn't need to be on the same 8 or 10 or 41 people all the time. So I'm inviting you to be part of that concept.
All right, I opened up this panel with a pretty big question, so I think I want to end it with one, too. Do you guys think the town is ready to end this moratorium and begin, or do you think it's time to sit back down and
I have to have Anne Marie on this. Please, Anne. I'm not equipped to answer that. Please. Anne Marie's the land use coordinator and many other things for North Fork Environmental Council.
Thank you, Mark. I just want to say the town moratorium here lasts till April 2025, as Jan said earlier. If you go to the town website, the BESS task force that they appointed, some pretty good volunteers, put together a report they gave to the town board. It's pretty long, but if you're a nerd like me, you'll read it and find all the good recommendations in there. Also, the state has a task force that is developing state parameters for BESS, and I forget the website, but if you Google it, you'll find it. You have until September, I believe, to submit public comment on the state's plan, which is very important. And it's important that people read this stuff and get involved, because otherwise you'll be saying a year from now, gee, I didn't know the town was doing this. Well, be prepared, they're doing it and they put it out there and people should be reading it. It probably doesn't get much press coverage, but it probably should.
And I actually have one more question for you. I thought it would be a really good one. What are the specific challenges and opportunities associated with integrating BESS into Southfield Town's historic district and other sensitive areas. You know, it's a very old community, it's a very environmentally fragile community, and is just very familiar with it, so I want to get her
That's a
opinion.
great question. So I know there are some people here that were opposed to the one in Cutchogue, and I hope you'll get up and talk about why you were opposed. I think they shouldn't be in heavily populated areas like where most of our historic districts are. And also the BEST task force, in their report, I believe they said that they would recommend prohibiting them on prime agricultural soil, which is most of Southold town is prime agricultural soil. So that's something to be really careful about. And you know, on the one hand, I kind of feel as an environmentalist, most of the town, we shouldn't have any of these things anywhere because we're so sensitive ecologically. But on the other hand, you know, maybe we'll need one. We have some heavy blackout situations going on and we're still building everywhere. So that's a whole other consideration.
Thank you, Ann. I wanted to open up for a comment or questions from anybody. Okay, be right there.
Can I come up and take the mic?
Yes, you can.
My name is Alex O'Mara. I'm a member of Friends of Oregon Road, and we're the group that is opposed to the development of the BESS, which is proposed on Oregon Road and Depot. I have a couple of things to say, but one thing I do want to just digress about is the topic of the task force, which sounded like a great idea, but actually we all found very disappointing because the task force did not include really any experts in the industry, and the only experts that the task force invited to speak were involved in the industry. There was no public comment allowed. And so that brings me to the next point. Thank you for being here, but I do want to put, is it Mike's comments into context. Let's be very clear that ESRG is paid by the battery industry. So they get paid when these developments get built. So let's just keep that in mind as we listen to his comments.
And we also almost get fired whenever we slow their progress down because they're not doing it right.
But let's follow the money trail. You guys get paid when these are developed. I think we can all agree that we all do support green energy, but when looking at battery storage, as other people have said, as Ann has said, it's important to look at location, and to look at location in two ways. First of all, is there green energy to store? And right now in Southold town, we don't have any green energy to store. It's also important to look at location in terms of siting these facilities. And as Ann said, Oregon Road, for instance, or the one that was proposed in Greenport, these are really delicate sites. So that's a key thing to consider. At this moment, therefore, the proposed BESSes are not green on the North Fork. It is not a green project because we have no green energy to store. Basically, what these projects are right now is a money grab because we have mostly foreign companies. The one that was proposed in Cutchogue is being built by a South Korean company that will come in, download the power from the grid, and sell it back to LIPA for a profit. So that's what I call a money grab. We will one day have green energy to store, we certainly hope, but it is not now. So for the East End, these projects are putting the cart before the horse. The proposed project in Oregon Road is a perfect example of why these projects don't fit in our community. We're relatively dense compared to, let's say, look at California or even upstate New York, where there are large tracts of land, and there are more BESSes there. But if the BESS were to be built, let's say, on Oregon Road, and if there were a thermal runaway event, what would happen? In all likelihood, the dump, the transfer station, would be closed to everyone in the community, and Route 48 would be closed, and there'd be a mass evacuation of the homes, of the surrounding homes. Not to mention, going back to the topic of the risk to our volunteer fire department, it's a huge risk. Contamination of our groundwater, significant noise pollution, which was not mentioned before, and air pollution. I would also point out that these projects do not bring any jobs to our community, not a single one, and they don't represent any significant increase in our tax base. The most significant economic effect of these projects is a decrease in property values to all the surrounding homes. New York State is not investing any money in the development of these batteries because they realize that this is not the technology of the future. The people that are developing these projects are corporations, often foreign corporations. For instance, KCE, the developer of the proposed BESS in Kachog, South Korea is limiting the development of these projects. So they're looking elsewhere to foreign countries like ours to develop them because they're not allowed to do it in South Korea, or not to the same extent. So in short, these projects don't have a place in our community, at least not for now.
I also want to add something to what Alex said about investments. The one that was proposed in Greenport a couple of years ago, I took to somebody in the town, I won't say who it was, who told me that it was an LLC that proposed it, and apparently the guy who was proposing to build it was a very wealthy investor who just wanted a tax break. And he's, holding on to the land, I guess, until he can figure out what else to do with it. But the point is that, people come in from out of town, like a lot of developers do of real estate, and they just decide they want to do this project for whatever benefit to them, but they're not thinking about the benefit to the community. And that's what we really have to keep our eye on, ultimately. And on the BESS task force, I would disagree with Alex's interpretation, because I know some of the volunteers who worked on it. They're really decent people who tried to do the best they could. Some engineers were on that. And I also want to add that if you read the report, one of the interesting things is that PSE&G and LIBA refused to answer or take any questions from that task force. They would not inform them where their substations are in South Old Town. They just refused to cooperate, and I find that really offensive. I don't know about you, but they should be upfront about what their plans are for these things, and they're not.
All right, I'm gonna go over here to this gentleman. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tom Saracasanis, and I was on the task force that's being discussed. I'm not sure if others from the task force on this rainy night are here in attendance, but I want to be, without getting into details about the quality of the membership or the scope of our report, is Ann said it's online at the South Old Town website, and it speaks for itself. There's a cover page, and then there's a lot of recommendations. The recommendations, by the way, are in ranges. If these recommendations are adopted, then there's a choice or a spectrum. But when I look at the cover page, I just want to make one point, that the purpose of the task force is not to recommend or not recommend that battery energy storage systems are the right thing for the North Fork, or specifically where. We do say specifically in the report that that's a political, governmental, elected official conversation and decision, not for the task force. What the task force is there for is, depending on which direction elected officials wish to go, that they would be informed by what, at that juncture, back in March of 2024, was what we consider as a committee the most informative points of view for all of the different considerations that you've heard today. So I want to try to divorce the political side of this. Is it the right thing for the North Fork? That's not what the task force was there to recommend. But if they were to go forward, some of the best practices, some of the pitfalls, some of the advantages would be there for that governmental agency or group of elected officials to make their decision. So, we come in peace here, and we know our role. We didn't try to overstep it. And if anyone has questions about why certain people were on the task force or why certain people were there to provide information or not, certainly I and the other committee members are available to discuss that.
Thank you for your comment. I have a hand on the other side of the room. I'll be right there. Just make sure to introduce yourself to the people.
Hi, my name is Glennis Berry. It seems as though the whole purpose of these installations is for when the power grid fails. So what kind of analysis is looking at other mixtures and the cost-benefit analysis and the environmental impact? For instance, what kind of combination of energy source, like a combination of wind and solar, will minimize the need for backup system? And also, a lot of people have installed solar panels, but they have to connect to the grid. Now, in some places, they have switches where, you know, the community becomes more resilient when the power grid goes off, that there's more resilience in the local community. So I'm wondering if also looking at community installations as well as residential regulations, it needs to be a broader analysis, because then you might be able to minimize the need for backup. And if you are developing it, I hope you have clear guidelines on siting for both land uses, both, you know, with the methane from the landfill and residential districts to groundwater protection, and what are those? So I just think people need to think a little bit more holistically.
Thank you, Glynis. The word holistic came out, thank you, I appreciate that. Long-term vision has to be part of this. And I was telling the story to the guys before we started. A friend asked me to help her look for a laptop. And I said, sure. So we picked one out, got on the internet, and, you know, found this, found that, found the other thing, got the price and everything else. And 6 months later, she calls me and says, oh, she says, I'm ready to buy that laptop. And I said, you are 9 generations too far past that. We can't even find that thing in the store anymore. And I think technology being what it is, it's not going to change in 6 months. I understand that. There's a lot slower change for these things, but there's talk out there, and I hope you say something about this, Mike, that the next generation may not be lithium. It may be salt. It may be hydrogen. And for us to build 10 of these things and all of a sudden get stuck in an old technology may not be the smartest thing either. Maybe if we build one and we realize that 3 years from now we should be building a different one, and then 3 years later we're going to be building a different one. So we're spending a lot of time, and I don't begrudge the time, obviously, but keep an eye on the industry. And remember too that a lot of technology takes 30 years to become mainstream. So when we had pagers, it wasn't that long ago, it was 34 years ago that I got my pager. And within a few years the pagers went from this to this. And then after that, the phones went to this. And now the phones are like this. So, and where are we? 30 years later, there are, I think, 10 billion cell phones on the planet. But it took 30 years to get there. So, Mike.
Yeah, first off, what's a pager?
My grandmother told me about that.
Yeah, no, appreciate all of that and the question as well. I think that's very important to think about. In terms of the battery technology, because of course, we're very agnostic when it comes to, you know, the technology. So if there's anything like the better that comes out, say for more energy dense, I think that's always going to be a good thing. What we've seen over the past, you know, maybe 6 years, you know, and I've been really looking into this stuff, has been it's still lithium ion, and it's still there actually is a new change with the lithium ion chemistry, which somebody mentioned the nickel manganese cobalt oxide batteries in terms of like metals and mining, things like that. And actually we've seen a shift very quickly to lithium iron phosphate, or LFP. So we do see these things move very quickly, but yeah, I'm actually a little surprised that we haven't seen other technologies present, but this makes up about 90-something% of the market right now, and it hasn't seen change recently. So, all right. We've got
The
one
lady's
over there
gonna
too.
break her arm if you don't pick her.
My name is Margaret Cruz. And Mark, you were talking about But I can't remember how you were saying it, but it was almost like, oh my God, this is impossible, and does that mean we just have to stick with fossil fuels? And I think when you talk about time and holistic, we are still using so much electricity that we don't need. I mean, we don't need all, I mean, really, we're not lit up too much in this room. A lot of times, though, people, you know, we're using too much, and so we're gonna keep using the fossil fuels, and we have to change the way we're living. That's just so important. And you know, stop ordering everything from Amazon, and turn off your lights, and if it's a cool night, turn off your air conditioner. All of that stuff is important, I think. And turn off the lights in the city so the birds don't kill themselves.
I agree, Margaret. You know, we always hear we have to increase the amount of energy because of the demand. That's on me. Not all on me. I understand that. 50% is 25% of the energy use is to produce energy. 25% is transportation. 25% is buildings. But we've got to get back to the idea of designing things before we start so that they will be the most efficient possible on the market when it comes out. And yeah, it's more expensive. I understand that. We're getting pushed back all the time about buildings. I want, and Glynis, we've talked about this at length. There are different certifications, there are different standards. LEED is not the only one. I found the other 11 in my stack the other day. Then there are different standards, but when the builder comes up and says, well, that's going to be 20% more expensive, then you know what? I'm going to find a young engineer and a young architect and a young builder, and I'm going to task them with finding this. They do it in school all the time. This is your test for the end of the year. This can't use more than 1 kilowatt per person per day in this building. Go make it happen. And we need to be drawing on younger people, not the same old, same old, same old. It can't be done. This is, yeah, it can be done. But again, meeting the demand of the increase. Oh, here's a good factoid. When you watch a YouTube video, do you go down to the little gear at the bottom, and it shows you how fast you can play it? And you can play it at 1.5 because it's really boring. Like this film will probably be 1.5 or 2. For people, one of the other settings at the bottom is how much pixels, how fine do you want to see this guy's sweat glands when you play the movie? So the difference between 420 and 720 isn't that great, right? Or 360 or whatever down at the bottom. I'm pointing at Mike Madigan. Thank you for bringing your camera today for this again, for documenting what we do. One of the seven, I like 720. It's not too bad, but it's not too great. But you get to 1080, and it's really nice. But it's also using 10 times more energy to produce that data stream. And then you go to 4K, 4,000 pixels in an inch. Oh my God, I can see this guy thinking. That's how great it is. But it's 15 more times more energy to produce that signal for your enjoyment. And I brought this up to a guy, a friend that we know, and he said, well, what's it costing me? Actually nothing, because you're not paying for the amount that you are using. The demand is there, and Cablevision runs, and YouTube, and Netflix, and Amazon, and the Disney people, and they're all racing like crazy to meet the demand, our demand for high quality video. And where is all that going? That goes into a server farm, into a building this big, full of rack servers, blade servers, not hard drives anymore, they're all solid state. And they're putting out heat. Every time you push the button to play a movie, they're putting out heat. And those server farms need energy. And they're not getting it from windmills. I'm sorry, they're not. They're putting solar panels on the roofs of these buildings, and they're doing their part, but it's not enough to meet the demand. So when you watch a movie and you go back to 720, or you go back to, 480, 460, 4 something, you get down to the 300s and you can't recognize the actors anymore. I understand that. But put it up to 400, put it up to 720, and know that you're using 15 times more energy by doing that. Right? We're not paying for that yet. We pay for our water by the gallon, 1,000 gallons, 10,000 gallons. We pay for our electricity by the kilowatt. We pay for our gas in our oil, in our fuel for our cars, by the gallon, by the whatever. We don't pay for trash pickup. We don't pay for the quality of the movies that come in. Cable. Yeah. I have serious, here's a good human behavior test. I'm into the social behavior part of all this. So I have Sirius Radio and it went up to $18 a month. So I leave it on all the time so I can get my money's worth. It's not the way it works. Right? If you don't put your garbage out, the guy comes by, he doesn't care. He gets paid $2 every time he goes by your house, whether you leave a can out or not. Oh, sorry.
All right, we're hoping to get this wrapped up by 10, so we have time for about one more question after this gentleman.
Good evening. I wonder about the moratorium. If it's such a complicated situation, is a year enough for the moratorium? And can it be extended? And how do you extend it outside of the village trustees determining what they do? I assume they do. Do they determine a moratorium?
The town board.
Town
in
board.
this case,
But
right?
aside from that, how do you influence just by voting whether you agree with them or not?
Well, right, the town could extend a moratorium, and if you feel, if all of you here feel the town should do that, then you should go to town hall and say to Al Krupski and the rest of the town board, you know what? You need more time to study
I
this
think
issue.
they did that.
Well, the moratorium will expire, I believe, in April 2025, so
Can that be reinstated?
it sure could.
Oh, okay.
It sure could. And in addition, the other thing to pay attention to, the two most important things in this town are zoning and the town code. That kind of, covers everything that happens in this town and where it happens. So if the town does decide to go through with a battery storage, promotion, they'd have to enact a code. But before they enact a code, they have a draft and they put it out for public hearings so that the public gets to review it, come out and talk about it. So, I mean, nothing on battery storage will get done in this town unless the public ultimately approves it, okay? But what you have to do is make sure that the town board pays attention to what you say. And the only way to do that is to show up.
Thank you.
And that's really the whole thing in a nutshell, really, right, Alex?
Yes,
She
agreed.
knows because she got people to show up to town hall.
Yes, the get off the couch party.
Yes, exactly. Thank you.
All right, one more question, and then I'm gonna make some closing comments.
Okay, I have a lot of notes here, things that struck me. I think in your council here, you have the word preserve, right? So that's a word that matters to me a lot. And one of my questions is, what's the rush? What's really making it, what's the rush? Is it some economic concern? Things that I noted here is, I don't really understand the local benefit. I understand the local risk very well, and I realize that everything has risk and rewards. But I see the risk very big, but I don't see the reward. And that would need to be explained to me, but not yet. I'm not done yet. Also, other notes that I took. In the beginning, you had the word thermal runaway, right? That sounds like a scary thing. I mean, if I was making a movie called Thermal Runaway, it wouldn't be a comedy, right? So that's something I'm not sure about. I also noticed in the image that there are these light poles, right? Are those light poles something that, if it were constructed, would be on all the time? Would there be lights on all the time, even through the night? You see, there's a reason that we live out here. We love living out here. And it won't preserve that feeling if we take away the reasons why we're here. So there are big cultural questions going on here. We don't want to destroy what we have so we can, have a few more minutes of electricity. That'll ruin everything. So are those light poles on all the time because there are birds and I walk on that road quite often, and one of the pleasures is that there's no sound and there's no light and I can hear the birds. I don't want that to go away. That makes it less pleasant to live here. That's the reason we're here. We can't forget why we're here. Like doing something, especially if it has no local benefit. And also, let's suppose that it passed. How long would it take to construct that thing? Are we talking about years? Are we talking about trucks? I mean, I know, when you're talking about trucks and supplies and everything, what does it disrupt our lives? Are we giving up 3 years of our lives? Some of us, that's a significant part of the rest of our lives. So, and groundwater. I mean, we have a well. What is the danger to groundwater after one of these fires? And when we talk about it, I heard somebody say, an electric car crashes, and well, what do cars do except crash? I mean, so I just think, and I don't see the green initiative. I don't see this as a green initiative. Now, I'm not a scientist, and I don't know about this, except I know what I know. And those are all the things that I know, and I think I get the sense that we need to slow down here, really slow down and figure out what we're doing. And when you brought up a cell phone now has the technology that a mainframe had not many years ago. So what else is coming down the road, right?
Yeah.
And what's the rush?
So I'm gonna take one last question
John,
over
can we
here.
have Mike respond to that, some of that?
Yes.
There was a lot there, and all good questions as well. And I think, if we're not answering those, and I think some of the companies proposing this would be better suited than I am right now, because there are so many different use cases. But yeah, we should be able to come in here and answer those questions. That's why there are so many concerns, because they're not doing a good enough job, right? In terms of the lights, though, no, I think those you can have automatic dimmers and stuff like that automatically pop off. That's all I really have over there. We can talk afterwards.
Got a quick comment. I know thermal runaway sounds very scary, but at the same time, if I told you all that I was gonna go on vacation waterboarding in Guantanamo Bay and you didn't know what any of those words means, that probably sounds very great. So.
That would be your risk, though. You would take that risk on alone and it wouldn't impose it on the whole community. So it's very different.
I wanted to just, point out after what Raphael just said about new technologies. There was in Dan's papers recently an article about the Southampton moratorium, and Governor Hochul announced that the state will receive U.S. Department of Energy funding for a long-duration energy storage demonstration project being developed upstate that will use fire-safe battery technology instead of lithium-ion batteries. The technology can be used in urban and rural settings to demonstrate a stable energy supply during periods of high demand and in extreme weather conditions, she said. It is capable of delivering electricity for 10 to 24 hours, surpassing the conventional short-duration systems that lithium-ion can typically support, she added. So we're talking about new technology now that is being supported by the Department of Energy to New York State specifically.
All right. I have some final comments I'd like to make, and then we're gonna give our panelists a round of applause and get all home. And what I wanted to say is that the 21st century is coming up, guys. The tides are rising, and we have to make some hard decisions around here in Southwold Town. Now, I was born in Southwold Town, and I've spent my whole life here, and I'd like to see it above water for the rest of my life. And I know that it's easy to, throw the buck on this one and say, well, this sounds like a great idea, but not here. We can't just stop the future. We can't just stop the world that's becoming. And if we here on the water, where climate change matters the most, where rising waters matter the most, decide that we are going to shirk our responsibilities to give this the attention that it needs, then when those where it really matters in in Wyoming and Texas and Idaho decide that, hey, why would I ever want to have a bunch of these ugly wind turbines along? Let's just keep burning fossil fuels. People on the water, that's tough, you know what I mean? Not my problem though. So what I would like to say, and this is apart from NFEC, this is my own personal comments, is that as the future comes, we have to move along with it, and we have to keep realizing that we can't have our cake and eat it too. And we're gonna have to make this hard decision, and hopefully one day, instead of gas stations, you know, everywhere like we see on the North Road, and farmers got their big tanks of diesel in the ground to go load up the tractors, we'll take a look at making it nice and renewable before we are under the water. Now, could we please get a nice round of applause for our two panelists?